What if Earth at the orbit of Mars? What would happen to humans, plants, animals? An ecosystem. Imagine one day the Earth was suddenly shifted from its current orbit around the Sun to the orbit of Mars. At first glance, it might not sound too extreme. After all, Mars is not too far from Earth, just one planet away. But in cosmic terms, that small difference means massive changes in temperature, sunlight, atmosphere, and the survival of life as we know it. But in cosmic terms, that small difference means massive changes in temperature, sunlight, atmosphere, and the survival of life as we know it. The most immediate change would be the amount of sunlight Earth receives. Mars orbits the Sun at about 1.5 times the distance of Earth, meaning the sunlight there is only about 43% as strong. Our planet would suddenly become much colder, with average global temperatures plummeting well below freezing. Even the tropics could turn into icy deserts. For humans, this would be a life or death scenario. Without advanced technology, our cities, agriculture, and energy systems could not handle the sudden cooling. Crops would fail on a massive scale, food supplies would collapse, and billions of people would struggle to survive in freezing climates. Humanity would need to rely heavily on artificial environments, heated domes, or underground shelters to endure. Plants, which depend on sunlight for photosynthesis, would be among the first to suffer. With less light and colder conditions, most crops and natural vegetation would die out. Only specially adapted plants, possibly modified through biotechnology, could grow under such conditions. Forests would shrink, grasslands would wither, and agricultural lands would become barren. Forests would shrink, grasslands would wither, and agricultural lands would become barren. Animals would follow soon after. Herbivores that depend on plants would face starvation, and carnivores would lose their prey. Entire food chains could collapse in just a few years. Some species might adapt by migrating toward artificial human-controlled habitats, while others would face extinction. The diversity of life on Earth would be drastically reduced. The oceans would also change dramatically. With reduced sunlight, ocean surfaces would cool, sea ice would expand, and marine ecosystems would collapse. Coral reefs, already under stress today, would not survive the sudden drop in temperature. Fish populations would plummet, threatening the food supply for both humans and marine predators. Ecosystems worldwide would enter a state of collapse. Deserts would expand as rainfall patterns shifted, while once lush rainforests could turn into frozen wastelands. The balance that keeps Earth's biodiversity stable would be shattered. Some microorganisms might thrive in colder conditions, but complex ecosystems would struggle to adjust. For humans, survival would depend on technology. Greenhouses powered by artificial light, nuclear, or renewable energy, and underground farming could provide food. Space suits, or heavily insulated clothing, would become daily necessities in many regions. Large-scale migration toward the equator might buy some time. But even equatorial regions would not be warm enough for traditional agriculture. Culturally, humanity would undergo a massive transformation. No. Cities might shrink or collapse as people move into climate-controlled zones. Governments would struggle to manage resources, leading to global conflicts over food, water, and energy. International cooperation would be crucial, but tensions could rise as nations compete for survival. Interestingly, one advantage of Earth moving to Mars' orbit would be slower climate change from global warming. The weaker sunlight, greenhouse gas effects would be reduced. But this benefit would be meaningless compared to the overwhelming cold that would dominate the planet. It would be a world where humans fight not against heat, but against eternal winter. The psychological effects would also be profound. Humans evolved under Earth's stable climate and seasonal cycles. Living in a world where winters are endless and summers feel like our current winters would change how we think, work, and live. Outdoor life would vanish, replaced by artificial environments and technology-driven societies. If we look at ecosystems that might adapt, perhaps some cold-resistant organisms like mosses, lichens, and certain bacteria would become dominant. Life would not disappear entirely, but the richness of Earth's biosphere would fade. Our planet would resemble a colder, harsher version of itself, closer to what we imagine Mars to be. Eventually, humanity might become more like a spacefaring civilization just to survive. We would live in enclosed habitats, generate our own food artificially, and rely less on natural ecosystems. Earth would no longer be the green and blue paradise we know, but a fragile outpost of life, clinging to survival in an orbit too far from the sun. So, what would happen if Earth was at the orbit of Mars? The answer is that life as we know it would not survive without massive technological intervention. Plants would wither, animals would die, ecosystems would collapse, and humanity would be forced into artificial survival systems. Our planet would become colder, darker, and lonelier. In the end, this scenario reminds us of just how perfect Earth's current orbit really is. The Goldilocks zone is not just a poetic phrase, it is a razor-thin balance that makes life possible. Moving even one planet away could erase billions of years of evolution and beauty. It shows us that Earth is not just our home, it is the only home we may ever truly have. It shows us that Earth is not just our home, it is the only home we may ever truly have.